to record this now. All right, and then share screens. And let's go to the, where we left off. And so this is where we last discussed. So the correlation coefficient, for example, if this is how to interpret the correlation coefficient, if it's 0.617 and the R squared is 0.38, so here's your Pearson correlation. It's at, for this particular example, it's 0.617. And then the significance, or the p-value, which is our statistical significance, where we always set our statistical significance level, is 0.05. So for this particular study, it's 0.057. And so we will consider it as statistically significant, and we reject the null hypothesis, and we therefore say that there is a correlation of our independent variable with the dependent variable. So right here, again, we reject the null hypothesis that there is no correlation, and we conclude that there is correlation or relationship. I think in this example, 0.617, the final statistical grade is 0.617. That's when, if you get a 0.617 p-value right here, but the printout actually for these slides is 0.05. So that's your significance for two-tailed. And so again, it's statistical, it reaches statistical significance, and therefore you reject your null hypothesis. So the other types of correlation are pi. We also have Point-Biserial. I have used this in one of my publications for the health maintenance in patients with diagnosed with multiple myeloma. And I have a correlation of one dichotomous variable with one continuous variable. So we looked at the adequacy of the maintenance and the non-adequacy of health maintenance. So that was the dichotomous dependent variable. And we look at one continuous variable, which we look at the score from 1 to 20 that the patient is compliant with in terms of the recommended screening and preventive measures as defined or as recommended by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and the U.S. Preventive Task Force. So, for example, if the patient did a colorectal screening, if the patient did a mammography, if the patient did the stool exam for occult fecal test. And so you have this continuous variable where the score is 1 to 20. And then the dependent dichotomous variable is adequacy versus inadequacy of the health maintenance. So that's an example of Point-Biserial correlation. The Kendall's tau is a non-parametric test. I actually sent you all a copy, the PDF of the, I sent you the PDF of the surrogacy of event-free survival with overall survival. So the gold standard, for example, for the application of the Kendall's Tau, the gold standard in oncology, of course, that the treatment really works is that the patient live longer. So that's why it's the outcome or the dependent variable in oncology is always overall survival. Did the patient live longer? That's always the dependent variable. So if I give you chemotherapy A, B, and C, A and B, usually it's just two arms. But there are studies where there are three arms, but most of the time, by the time you do your randomized controlled trial, it's always compared to the standard treatment and the new treatment or the new kid in the block. And so the overall survival is always the standard dependent variable in a lot of research in oncology. And so if that is the, if you want correlation, in the sample publication that I sent you for reading on Kendall's Tau, they were looking at the correlation of event-free survival, which means that the patient, event-free means that the disease did not come back, and then how long is the time that the patient enjoyed event-free survival. And they're looking at that as a potential surrogate marker for overall survival, because overall survival, you really literally have to wait until the patient dies, and it could take a very long period of time to determine the efficacy of a new treatment. And so the FDA is now considering looking at event-free survival as a surrogate marker to overall survival, or OS. So that's an example of the application of Kendall's Tau. It's a non-parametric test of correlation that can be used as an alternative to Spearman. And the publication that I sent you for your reading this week shows that the application of Kendall's Tau in looking at correlations of variables. So in that paper, the two variables are the event-free survival and overall survival. And that paper argued that event-free survival can be a surrogate marker for overall survival because there's strong correlation between these two variables, and that it's not pragmatic to really always look for overall survival as your outcome in oncology, because it can take a really long period of time before you will see the diversion of the survival line. It's called the Kaplan-Meier survival curve. And it's really expensive. It's very time consuming to wait for overall survival statistical difference in oncology. So that paper that I sent you as a reading for week 2 is arguing using Kendall's Tau statistics to support their argument that event-free survival can be a surrogate marker for overall survival. So that's really a good example of this type of correlation. Contingency coefficient is a non-parametric statistics to assess the association between two nominal variables. I have not done this in my own personal research. It's basically looking at, whether male or female, which are two nominal variables. And then you look at, this could be very interesting actually in my future research study. If I really believe that in my theoretical conceptual framework, in my assumption that decision-making outcomes, which is nominal, It's not really, it's not really ordinal, because it's just basically satisfied or not satisfied. I will have 1 and 2. And then if I will look at gender, if I will just look at male and female, so I have 2 nominal variables, and I'm looking at relationship of this, and I have, you know, I have I have some preliminary data that will support my theoretical assumptions. So I could look at contingency coefficient as a potential statistical approach to my research study. So, but I have not used contingency coefficient in my own personal research. I will send you the publications that I've done with health maintenance in multiple myeloma, because I use the point-biserial correlation in that paper. So the other one is the ETA or ETA. It's the universal measure. You will see all of this when you go to SPSS and you look at correlation statistics and their correlation. You will see all of these choices: the pi, the point-biserial, the Kendall's tau, contingency coefficient, and the ETA or the universal measure. So, and of course, you have your correlation coefficients, which is the commonly used, the Pearson or the Spearman. The universal measure ETA is used to measure relationships that are not monotonic. That is, the direction changes for different values. So this is one of the correlation statistics that you can use if you think that your theoretical assumption is that the relationships of the variables are not monotonic. So I think that covers all of these important concepts. There's also partial correlation. This one is also something that I haven't used in my own personal research. It allows you to describe the relationship between 2 variables after controlling for the influence of a 3rd variable. This is, it's like looking at interaction and you control the interaction. So again, this is the partial correlation is also have the same feature for the solution of the limitation of ordinary least square, which is partial least squares, and it has its own mathematical calculation as well. So lots of these choices, and it's so important to really go back to theory and go back to the measures, and to have strong fidelity to your theory, and to have strong fidelity to both theory and measurement. What did you use? What did that measure intended to measure? And to have strong fidelity to that. And then model your theoretical assumptions, and then use the appropriate statistics. Then the last part of the one that I'd like to emphasize, the University of Washington paradigm of teaching statistics, then you execute your computing component. So all of that, it's really important to look at. There's 4 checklists that I'd like you to remember all the time. As what are the foundations of your statistics? And then you look at the research, the relationship of research and statistics. And then you look at theory and the measures. You model appropriately. Then you select your statistics. Don't be an ANOVA researchers. Don't label yourself a regression researchers. but be true to what you are trying to measure. What's your research question? Be true to the foundations of the statistics, and then choose the statistics that you would like to use for your study. And then you get your best hypothesis and the result. You will have a best representation of the phenomenon. Everything will be affected by errors. Always that. So that's the variance. Okay? So that's the general picture of all of this. So any questions? I'm going to leave the floor open now for questioning, and then we will conclude this session. Questions? I have questions to kill the time. Let's start with Marlene. What's your PhD dissertation, Marlene?
That's a good one.
Marlene. Can you unmute your microphone and then speak?
I'm not sure yet with.
I can hear you now. Okay, good.
Yeah, I'm not very sure of my topic yet, but the previous semesters that I'm with Dr. Kwan, I was concentrating on spirituality, but it's more of a qualitative.
Qualitative nature, that's fine. That's always very good, because it will be good.
Time.
It takes time, and you do need to have a methodology to adapt. Are you doing what we call the in qualitative, whether we have thematic analysis, whether you're going to use grounded theory, which is by Gauss and Strauss. There are, or phenomenology. So those are methodologies. When you are doing qualitative research, you have to have strong fidelity to a methodology. Okay?
Yeah, I was thinking of a thematic analysis.
Okay, that's the most common one. More than okay. Just it's different methodologies in qualitative research have different strengths, and qualitative research has um, has its own following in United States. And when I go to conferences, what they're trying to really build in all the scientists in nursing and social sciences, that no one should say is that quantitative research is more rigorous and higher validity and reliability than qualitative research, because that's not really the case. I think that both methods will give you knowledge, will expand the knowledge, and it will improve our science. And so no one should say one is better than the other. Very good. Okay, but make sure, my advice to you, so that your paper will not be rejected if you submit it for publication, is you have to have a clear methodology. What is the methodology that you adhere to? Are you using thematic analysis? Are you using phenomenology? Are you using grounded theory? You need to study that specific methodology, and you have to have strong fidelity. You have to adhere strictly to that methodology so that your paper don't get rejected. Okay? All right. So I see Neil John. You told me the first quarter you would like to develop a conceptual framework, a theory on spirituality, and then I sent you that there's already a theory or some scales are already developed based on their conceptual conceptualization of what spirituality in the United States, I'd really like to hear about what do you think in your own conceptual framework as a person, as a scientist, because we have all our own biases, and our biases are actually influenced by our day-to-day observations. So it could be that our biases are the leads towards better understanding, right? Because this is
Yes.
the one that we observe in our data. And then in Philippines is Catholic. It could be very different. It's 98% of the Philippines are Catholic. It could be that the spirituality, the construct of spirituality is very different than the construct of spirituality in Western countries. So what do you think?
Because actually, Doc, at that time I was planning to take up I was going to take up me psychiatric nursing as my major,
Mhm.
but because of time constraint, I delved into the medical surgical nursing.
Okay.
So the struggle is how to let's say associate spirituality to medical surgical.
Okay. Do you have an advisor already? Sometimes what I suggest to a lot of international students that because US, UK, Canada, Australia, the PhD programs have matured. They've been doing PhD programs since 1960s, and Philippines, we started doing PhDs probably maybe in Manila around in the 90s. I'm not very sure. Don't use that quote from me, but I would just say that in United States PhDs, which is the philosophy of the science, the way we know things, is really mature, and they've been doing a lot of research, and they pioneered a lot of these theories and conceptual framework. And so I would say that a lot of countries will test and validate the different tools that's already used in America and see if that model holds true in your country, in our country, the Philippines. So you can actually use the spirituality tool developed by US Western researcher and been tested and validated in Western patients. But the question is, will this theory, all the theoretical construct of spirituality in Western countries, hold true when you put that and give that measure to the Filipinos? And that could be, and it's highly publishable. You've seen a lot of publication about testing and validation, and even the French did a conversion or a version of my tool, acceptability skills, and it was very unique. Is that their acceptability scale in the US, when I did the study with my mentor, was that it was unidimensional. By the time it got administered to the French, they have actually multidimensional. Their acceptability is not just a unidimensional, it means two dimensions. There are more than just one dimension in that acceptability of scale for interventions or online programs, which was my boss developed, which is the electronic self-report assessment for cancer. And we use that scale to measure the acceptability, the construct of acceptability. By the time it's used by the French, it got published in psycho-oncology. And it has two constructs. So you see what could be the meaning of acceptability in the United States is so different than the acceptability. The same thing with you. You've seen all the different version, the Chinese version, the Spanish version of the different tools, because tools or measures are attached to theory. The question is, will that theory hold by the time you apply it to a different population and sample? So that's the thing. I'd like you to think of that. If you're still interested about spirituality and you would like quantitative approach, which is you have a tool and then you administer it, that's quantitative. Qualitative, of course, is lots of words. and you record all of the words that comes out from your respondents, and then you try to do thematic analysis, and again you adhere to a specific methodology. But in qualitative, it's very different. There's already a theory, there's already a tool, and then you try to see if that will hold true in the Philippines. For example, using the spirituality scale that I think I emailed it to you, Neil John. So if you're still interested with that, I would say validate and develop the version, the Philippine version of that spirituality scale, and see if it will hold true.
I'll take note of that, Doc. I think I can do. I think I can, but I can.
Okay.
Thank you, Doc.
So, are you saying that you're changing your topic?
Actually, I'm still going to line it with spirituality, but I don't know how to construct. Let's say first the title, then the content. What would be my intention regarding spirituality in relation to nursing?
Okay.
Because there are a lot of dimensions when we speak of spirituality, actually.
All right. Well,
It's something to think
a
about.
lot of thinking. Really, yes. And the key I would advise you is to really narrow it down, because science is incremental. You can only expand knowledge. You can only expand science bit by bit by bit by bit. So be very focused, narrow your research question. You can really, again, narrowing it to population. So these are patients who are end-stage dialysis. And you go to those who are receiving dialysis and you check their spirituality. So that's a very specific, narrow question, and you slowly advance our understanding about spirituality. So don't say it will be applicable right away to the general population, because that's not how science moves forward. It really is very incremental. So I would suggest that you have a specific population.
Yes. Thank you, Doc.
You're very welcome. And then CT, we still have time until the video will be cut off and dead, and that's it. We've used our 340 minutes.
Actually, Doc, my study entails about parenting, like responsible parenthood. The exact title that I have formulated for my study is responsible parenthood leads to formation of solid families. So I was able to identify, like created my own theory regarding about the characteristics of a responsible parents, and also involving the children. So it's quite.
Oh my God! You know what? If you're still in need of
within the scope
of an advisor, my classmate actually, Chi Yang, who's a professor of EY University. If you go to my Facebook, you will see she's a friend of mine, and she's a assistant professor at EY. And she graduated actually just 1 year ahead of me, so she's class of 2010, and her dissertation was about goose mothers. So why is it that she studied goose mother? Because the Korean women are considered as having the characteristic of goose, or plural geese, and there's this characteristic about goose mother, that they are away and they make a lot of sacrifices within. So that, again, it's parenting. And so I thought right away of Chi Yang Cha. That's her. You can friend me on Facebook, and then and in science, it's so important. Even if you don't invite them as your committee member, but don't be shy and just say, can you give me a feedback on my PhD dissertation? Because Dr. Tarryman said that you studied parenting based on the concept of goose parenting, or the goose parents, or the geese parents of in the Korean context. Very
Yeah,
interesting. Very, very.
yes, Doc. And actually, my participants, and that I was thinking of, immersing with those families in the remote areas, because I wanted to know if they're still aware, or they're really, how knowledgeable they are regarding about parenting here in the Philippines, and the effect it has on their children.
The more specific, the more you
Yeah.
isolate your patient population or your population of interest, the better.
Mhm.
Because even though we can only uh, gain insights from that particular population, but then later on, there's a lot of publications in other countries, and we do systematic reviews, we do integrative literature review, and that's what we call metadata or big data. And then we do this analysis, and we try to get what's the commonality, what's the universal theme from all this stuff. So you contributed to the science. No matter, so the more specific your study is, you made a dent to that understanding of the phenomenon. So I highly encourage you to always think of how specific you
Thank
are
you,
in
Doc.
your research question and how specific you are with your patient population, because later on, when everything is published, when everything is in the repository of all the universities, because all PhD dissertations are now online, deposited to a lot of universities, and we can do integrative reviews. We can integrative, which means the combination of qualitative and quantitative research, and then we can do systematic review, which are all quantitative research, and again, it could also be just part of a literature review, which is a smorgasbord, or there's no specific rules on how they synthesize, what's the available literature, and that's what we call just uh, a lit review, but you did not adhere to specific rules. So there's literature review, there's systematic review, and there's integrative literature review, that your study could potentially be included and become part of the science. So don't be paralyzed. Just want you to get your thinking hat all the time, and then write your dissertation, get your PhD degree, and make a dent, make a contribution to that body of knowledge. And that's the goal. And then that's not the end of your career after you graduate and you get your PhD. You will still have a lifetime career as a PhD when you become a professor, and you continue to do research, and you continue to advance the understanding. You continue to expand the science of your research interest. So, all right.
Doc, I have a question, Doc. I
Yes.
saw in one of your presentation regarding the reliability
Mm-hmm.
index. How do you do the reliability index
Oh,
of a certain
the
tool?
Cronbach's alpha. So reliability, there are at least two that I've used. It's always the most common is Cronbach alpha, when the responses are not dichotomous, such as ordinal scales. You can use Cronbach alpha, and then that's actually right here as one of my things that I've done for my student, is to look at Cronbach's alpha all the time at the beginning, right here. Because without Cronbach alpha, it doesn't show you that your tool is reliable. And if your tool is not reliable, the result is not valid, because reliability is a component of validity. So Cronbach alpha for this particular perceived knowledge scale was 0.87. There were 5 items, and they were Likert types. So that's one thing. The other one is if you do pre-test and post-test on knowledge, and you have dichotomous answer, that is a correct answer and an incorrect answer, and your correct answer could be labeled as 1. An incorrect answer is labeled as 0. You can use the Cronbach's alpha on SPSS, and it will automatically pick up and will give you the Kuder-Richardson 20 statistics for reliability. It shows you how reliable your test items are in measuring the knowledge that you want to measure. For example, knowledge on catheterization, so you probably will develop 5 questions in that, and then it's a yes, no, correct, incorrect, correct, incorrect, and then once you have that, you can use your Cronbach alpha, but the output looks like Cronbach alpha, but it's a Kuder-Richardson 20. So it's a reliability testing of the tool, of the test.
So based on that result, Doc, how can we say that the scale is reliable?
Anything that's 0.7 for Cronbach's alpha is considered reliable. It has adequate reliability. 0.80 is very good reliability. And the higher, when it becomes 1, that's really 100% reliability. So that's how you interpret the result. So for this particular example, I have a reliability 0.87. So the questions that the student administered to measure the perceived knowledge this is actually a perceived knowledge on, what are they trying to measure? I'm trying to remember this. I didn't label it 100% right away, but on induction, on induction sequence of anesthesia, because this is one of the study of my nurse anesthetist student, and they administered 5 questions to measure the knowledge on the induction sequence of anesthesia. And they did pre-test and post-test, and they developed an educational tool to improve the knowledge. And so they have this perceived knowledge scale. So pre-test without the video yet that they developed, which is the video education that the student developed. And then post-test is after they have introduced the video, whether it improved the perceived knowledge. So that's an example of if it's a Likert type scale, because it's perception. So agree, strongly agree, neutral, and then disagree, strongly disagree. So that's a Likert type. So you can do a Cronbach alpha for that. But if it's a very specific question about, what is the first step in induction of anesthesia, and they get the wrong answer, you need to code it as 0101, which is, or 1 and 2. Actually, the rule is 0101 all the time. It's always 0 for incorrect answer and then 1 for correct answer. And then the Cronbach alpha on SPSS will produce an output that looks similar to Cronbach alpha, but it needs to be interpreted as a Kuder-Richardson 20 or KR20. And 0.5 is actually considered as adequate. Points, the higher the Kuder-Richardson is, it will tell if it has a Kuder-Richardson of 1, it has a very high discriminating properties, so therefore it's highly reliable, because it will discriminate those who really learn and those who did not learn. But if it has a Kuder-Richardson 0 value, then it has no ability to distinguish those who learn and who did not learn, and has 0 reliability. So it has the same, it's from 0 to 1, but the Kuder-Richardson 20, they considered the reliability of the tool at 0.5. So I hope that answered your question. Reliability is really a measurement of internal consistency. It's like, is the tool consistently measuring the construct that it intends to measure? So if I'm measuring, the construct of spirituality, is this tool really, really consistently measuring spirituality based on the theory that you said are the components of that tool? Because you're the researcher. The initial developer theorized that these are the components of spirituality, and they put that in the questionnaire. And that's the same way when I develop my shared decision-making scale, which we will talk about when we do factor analysis. You're ahead of the curve. That is part of the things that we do when we do instrument development and testing. And I'm excited to share to all of you because I did acceptability scale. Now I'm on my second attempt to develop a scale, which is the shared decision-making scale for nurses in oncology setting. So very specific. I wanted to really know competency of nurses in shared decision making. And what are the construct of competency? Well, if you look at the Leadership Institute in London, they said that competency, knowledge, and skills are just the tip of the iceberg. Google iceberg model of competency. And then it tells you iceberg, it just always gives you 1/4 on the surface, and there's still 75th that are uncovered. An iceberg, that's why the Titanic sank, because they thought it's just a very small ice, but actually it's a very huge ice, and that's why it sank the Titanic. So competency, knowledge and skills are essential elements of competency, but then you need to look at attitudes, you need to look at motives, you need to look at personality, you need to look at values and their beliefs. And so now you need to incorporate that in your measurement, in your scale, because you know that theoretically competency is not just about knowledge and skills. It includes the lower, the hidden part of the iceberg, and those are the one that's really hard to capture in the tool. So keep thinking deeper. So in my study, I build the knowledge, I build the questions to measure the skills, but I also tap into attitudes. And one of my colleagues said, Joseph, you're also tapping into beliefs, but I can't really capture the difference of attitudes and beliefs. And so I'm just going to start with attitude. I know I'm going to make a dent in that science already. And in the future, if my factor analysis, if my eigenvalues, if my scree plot will only show 3 factors that account 70% of the variance, then I'm still missing 30% of my model, and I will continue the science, and I will continue to keep on researching of what's really competency of shared decision making among nurses in oncology. So that's what science is. That's the beauty about science. It's like, don't be paralyzed that you only have 30% of the understanding, because that's better than a 0 understanding. Right now, nobody has looked at competency of shared decision making for nurses in oncology. I'm the first one. So I will be the first one to expand the science in that area. So you can make a dent. You are PhD. That's what PhD is all about, is Doctor of Philosophy. It's the underpinnings. It's the foundations of the way how we know things are the way it is. That's what philosophy is all about. That's why you get a doctorate in philosophy, because that's the highest level of education. That's a terminal degree for learning things. So you are a doctor of philosophy in nursing science, because now that's why we have doctor of philosophy in mathematics, doctor of philosophy. Why is it PhD? Why do we call it doctor of philosophy? Because it is the terminal degree for knowing things the way we know it is now. And we always challenge that. We always have the pursuit of truth. Is it really the truth? And so that's our guiding principle. Yes. All right. Any other questions? Well, we're going to end this session, and we're going to move on to week 3 next week. Yay. And so keep chugging along. We have 7 weeks, and I'm guided by the syllabus. If it's time for online test, I will send you the link for online test. When it's time for group test, you will get your group test. Okay? All right. Bye, everyone. Okay, bye. Good night. Bye-bye.